Ayubowan, good evening all the way from Colombo, Sri Lanka. The destination branding and managing a destination image are essential elements of a destination marketing efforts. The destinations with good reputations and a better reputation and with a better image seems to be easy to market and also easy to get more tourists to that particular country. And we have seen it, and you may not wonder why the Paris is finding more easier to market than Kabul or Johannesburg. Hence, the destinations must be favorably differentiated, positively differentiated compared to its rivals. And then this positioning will give you what is required for that particular country. The key process of destination marketing is a creation and a management of a distinctive and an appealing image for the potential travelers. This is what we call creation of the image. The creation of the image is actually what we call a co-creation. Every responsible stakeholder of the place, of the country, of the city will keep on creating that image and be part of the co-creation. Today, we are looking at somewhat end of the light at the end of the tunnel. COVID is coming to an end, or at least we hope with the vaccine, and we resume, or at least we hope the world travel will start very soon. Then what shall we do? As a destination, we have to look beyond the COVID and make sure the destination is ready when the time comes in. So along with the Sri Lanka tourism and with the stakeholders, this particular webinar series will actually reveal something very interesting. And let me just take you through today. We have in the panel Mr. John Bailey, Managing Consultant, Global Communication Consulting, a global expert in travel and tourism. Mr. Damien Cook, the founder and the CEO of the e-tourism frontier, and Dr. K.P. Lalichandral, who is a lecturer and senior lecturer in the Department of Marketing and Management, University of Sri Jayawardenepura, and also we don't have no stranger to this, Mrs. Krimali Fernando, Chairperson, Sri Lanka Tourism. Welcome all of you. On behalf of Advocata and Sri Lanka Tourism, we believe this particular workshop, or at least the webinar, will actually give you some sort of an insight of creation of the image as well as the co-creation process, so that we will be ready in moving forward with Sri Lanka tourism when that day comes in pretty soon, I believe. So with that note, I would like to invite Dr. K.P. Lalichandral, who has done a wonderful research, and this particular research is very, very important. There are three components in an image that we need to know. One is, what is the current image? What do people think? And then what is the post image, the pre and the post image? And then what is that gap that we are looking at it, and how do we actually build that gap? It is not only the responsibility of the government or the public sector, it is a responsibility of all stakeholders, and we call it a co-creation process that is taking place. So may I now invite Dr. K.P. Lalichandral, who has done a primary research on the pre-expectations, or at least a post-experience survey on the destination Sri Lanka. Over to you, Dr. Lalit, and we will be actually taking the discussions forward from the finding of that research.
Thank you, Dilip. Good evening to all of you. I am so glad to be a part of this timely important event organized by Sri Lankan Tourism Men. So I am so happy to share the research findings that we found from our research, as Dilip pointed out. So in the next few minutes, I will take you through the key findings of the research that we have undertaken during 2017 to 2019 time period. So research was about images of Sri Lanka as a tourist destination, funded by the University of Sri Jayawardenepura and undertaken by a panel of researchers of the university. And two objectives guided our research. Firstly, what are the images pursued by the lesser purposed visitors based on the actual experiences, and also to compare whether these images are on par with the images that we have projected, as well as images the visitors bear in their minds when they visit Sri Lanka. I mean the post-visit images. In order to pursue these image objectives, we employed a kind of mixed method approach. So we collected data using both qualitative and quantitative approaches. For example, surveys, semi-structured interviews, travel book narratives. So This survey question actually we conducted in 5 languages with the support of 10 trained field workers who can manage these the languages. So to support the research, we actually employ 2 theoretical guidance. First, the cognitive and affective framework, and secondly, the 3-dimensional framework. So cognitive images actually, the images that tourists know about Sri Lanka. What do they know before they visit? For example, if they know that Sri Lanka is a kind of very beautiful destination, Sri Lanka has friendly people. So those are some examples for cognitive images. Now, when it comes to the affective images, so they are the images that are associated with strong emotions. For example, excitement, joy, the feeling of amazement, likewise. The second approach, the 3-dimensional framework, comes in handy in undertaking a kind of more comprehensive study, considering all the 3 attributes. For example, first the individual and the holistic impressions. So how Sri Lanka is pursued on individual attributes like natural attractions, wildlife, tea estates. So then what are the impressions that tourists have about Sri Lanka, kind of the total impressions? For example, if they perceive that Sri Lanka is a kind of very green destination, Sri Lanka is a country filled with happiness and friendly mood. So those are examples for holistic images. Secondly, we can analyze the image in terms of directly observable and measurable aspects. For example, attractions, the tourist hotels, infrastructure, and what are the images that tourists have in terms of certain less tangible or we cannot directly observe or we cannot directly measure. So mostly the experiential elements. For example, the friendliness of people, the tranquil atmosphere of the country. So that is the second dimension that we can analyze the destination image. Thirdly, how Sri Lanka is pursued on common attributes as well as unique attributes. So whether we have unique features like unique Sri Lankan cuisines, or whether we have attributes, experiences which are common with other neighboring destinations. So that was about the methodology and the theoretical guidelines that supported our study. Now, moving on to the key findings. So what are the most favorable attributes or the features that are pursued by visitors based on their real experiences? So we found that Sri Lanka is very favorably evaluated on a lot of and wide variety of attractions, the hospitable and friendly residents of the country. Thirdly, sorry for the technical error.
Yes. So in the meantime, yeah, we are having a slightly connection issue. But in the meantime, what Dr. Lalit was explaining about the methodology of the research, and then it came into the key findings. And this research actually was supported by many stakeholders in Sri Lanka. And during this process, I think the University of Sri Javandanapura, under the guidance of Dr. Lalit Chandra, will actually start working with a large number of students. And this is the first time that the university and academia actually has come forward to work with the private sector as well as the public sector, that you do a research that actually will result a policy making decisions, or at least decision making data that will be useful for us. So I think the most important thing here for us is this actually information can be useful not only for the public sector but also for the private sector. For example, what type of images that you should have in your website, what type of content you should have in your brochure, and this will give you a very clear idea. Over to you, Doctor.
Thank you, Dilip. So Sri Lanka can offer a diverse and rich range of experiences for visitors. Moving on. The diverse landscapes and varied climate and geography of the country, a great variety of fauna and flora, the world iconic Buddhist attractions, that UNESCO heritage sites of the country, then the marvelous national parks and wildlife. Particularly Sri Lanka is strongly associated with the wild elephants in travelers' mind. And the pristine beaches and coastline and beach-related activities available for the tourist. The interest in local cultures, custom, traditions. So in addition to these strongly held images, now we also found on these attributes Sri Lanka was also positively evaluated by the tourists. For example, appealing local cuisines and variety of foods, good hotels, cafes, restaurants for tourists, the spices and tea, that Sri Lanka is famous for. Reasonable price for good and accommodations. Actually, they were not happy about the prices charged at the tourist attractions, but they are quite happy about the prices charged for the food and accommodation. So, in addition, we found that these aspects also were favorably evaluated by tourists, like opportunities for sea-based activities and other adventurous activities, the opportunities for blissful experiences, opportunities for increased knowledge and revitalize the spirit of visitors, and finally, the present weather of the country. On these attributes, Sri Lanka was very positively, very favorably evaluated, but on certain aspects, Sri Lanka received moderate evaluations. For example, the personal safety. Secondly, quality of service. Third, travel guide service delivered to the tourist. The opportunities for romance. And the availability of wide variety of festivals and celebrations. So particularly these areas, we need to think, right, how we can improve these experiences furthermore. If you take this personal safety, this is very important consideration for travelers when they make decisions regarding their destination choice. So we need to do certain things to improve these elements, and plus we found that certain attributes we are not doing well. For example, the infrastructure, modernity and the urbanization of the country, the local transportation and the parking. So they were not happy about the options available, lot of delays, they cannot book train tickets, the ripping off behaviors of these taxi drivers, the poor design of the train compartments. Likewise, number of things emerged from our research regarding this local transportation. And they are also not happy about traveling from one city to another city, for example, from Colombo to Kandy. So before they come to Sri Lanka, they thought it's very easy to reach within 1.5 hours, considering the distance. But actually, they realized that it takes more than 4 hours due to heavy traffic jams. So so there we need kind of proper town planning. Better road system, likewise maybe bypass roads, so that travelers can save their time visiting from one place to another place. And they are not happy about the information available for travelers, including the safety issues and poor nightlife and entertainment, I mean the hedonic aspects of the country, and the shopping opportunities, and finally, the pollution. So actually they are worrying about pollution, Sri Lanka being a very beautiful, very green country. So they expect Sri Lankan authorities to do something on these things. So my point of view that now we can come up with the green, that is what we are currently promoting. So green plus environmental friendly proposition. So that will be more appealing to tourists, and also we can address this pollution issue as well. Later on, we examine the holistic pictures of Sri Lanka as a tourist destination. So then we found very strong holistic pictures like scenic and beautiful, lush and green, compact and diverse, the friendly and happy, the tranquil and peaceful. So these are strongly held holistic images of the country. Plus, we found certain other holistic images. They did not emerge like as frequently like these things, but Sri Lanka is also associated with these images like adventurous, tropical, culturally rich, authentic, country with a lot of elephants and island destination, the beach destination. So then we analyzed the unique images of the country, and we found that that is the least favorable aspect of the country. So a lot of tourists actually could not even remind the unique images. Some claim that Sri Lanka has a kind of unique places, the Lion Rock, scenic train rides, Golf Fort, the Mulu Cave Temple, but majority got some time to remember these things. So, furthermore, we analyzed these affective images. So we found that Sri Lanka is very positive in terms of these emotional images, like very exciting, relaxing, pleasant, amazing, and happy, those things. So I think these areas we need to capitalize furthermore. So with that, I think we need to project these things in a more comprehensive and more vivid way. So with that, I think I can conclude the presentation. So it's over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ali Chantral. Thank you for the University of Sijavadanapura for that a great piece of work, and that's an example that how the public sector, private sector, and the academia can work together. So for joining, those who are joining on Zoom, you may share your questions via the chat function, Q&A box, or for those who are joining on Facebook, you can also ask your questions via slido.com using the hashtag Sri Lanka Tourism. So there are a lot more to be discussed during the course of this webinar. So let me just straightly move into the our question and answers session in terms of your panelists, and they'll be actually taking you through how this can be practically applied within the Sri Lankan context. May I just move into Damien? I think all the way, I don't know which part of the world you are currently. You must be in Kenya watching some live safari somewhere down. Damien, I think you have been working in this image of the destination in many countries and for many years. Would you very briefly explain what exactly do you mean by a destination image, and why is it so important for a country from a tourism marketing perspective?
Thanks, and welcome everybody. Great to be here again in Sri Lanka, talking to the industry. Yeah, brand image is very important, obviously when it comes to defining the destination as a tourism destination. But it's something that's changed a lot in recent years. We've seen a lot of shifts in travel and tourism in the last 5 to 10 years that have really been quite significant. And it's something that we need to consider as we look towards recovery from COVID as well. Is that the way people perceive travel, the way people perceive destinations has changed a lot. And that's not just the impact of COVID. There were changes that were there last year in 2019 in travel that the pandemic has actually accelerated and amplified. Everybody knows that last year was considered one of the most successful in terms of total numbers of arrivals and total spend of travel around the world. But it was also the year where we saw Cook go bankrupt, where we saw the hotel industry starting to be very concerned about loss of business to Airbnb and other alternative accommodation platforms. Those changes that were there are worth considering when we think about the way travelers were perceiving destinations through the filter of those changes of behavior. What we're really seeing is the rise of the millennial market, the impact of those millennials, people aged now between 24 and 39, who are the predominant market for travel, and their behaviors, having grown up online and in the digital space, has given them a different way of perceiving destinations. They are not seeing those television commercials. They're not seeing those print ads, those old ways of presenting a brand image. They're consuming content online, they're booking and buying travel online. And that really changes the thought processes that they go through from being exposed to a destination, being aware of a destination as a brand, through to actually traveling to the destination. And what you see when you consider through the filter of millennial travelers is that because they've grown up online, they're constantly exposed to choice. They've become very used to customizing their travel experiences, to being able to find products that are things that they're interested in, that is a unique experience based on their interests, their budget, and what they want to do. And what we've seen, that shift that we've been seeing, is the breakdown of the mass tourism model, because this is a demographic that doesn't want to be treated as a commodity, doesn't want to join a package tour, doesn't want to board a cruise ship, does not want to be told this is the destination you're going to and this is what you will do there. They want to see the destination their way. And they've found platforms to be able to do that. From inspiration, rather than a television commercial or a brochure or a magazine ad, they're looking at Instagram, which isn't one photo, it's thousands of photos. And they're finding the ones that appeal to them, their image of Sri Lanka that they would like to visit. And they're booking through smaller tour operators that can specialize in their interests. They're often booking those tours when they're in destination, taking their phone and opening it up while they're there and finding experiences to do and booking them, creating their own itinerary. So we have to be really careful when we talk about the image of a destination, that it's not a single image, that it's not just this is Sri Lanka and this is how you come to Sri Lanka and this is what you do. Customization, individualization is critical to us recovering tourism, because those millennial travelers will be the first people to begin traveling. And we've seen the process of millennial alignment, where other generations, particularly the ones younger than them, Generation Z, and those older travelers, are seeing the way that millennials have traveled, the different platforms and channels they're using, and they're starting to use them too. And we're going to see that form of travel coming back. So we need to make sure that the brand of Sri Lanka, the image of Sri Lanka, is one that can have something for many different tastes and many different niches. And it's not about one campaign or one single brand image for brand Sri Lanka. It's about multiple campaigns presenting different elements of the destination and, critically, different experiences that people can have in Sri Lanka to the right travelers that are looking for those experiences. So brand is fragmented in a way through the rise of this change travel. So it's become much more complex than just a logo, or a picture of some happy people, or a television commercial. We really need to change the way that we think about travel, and we need to think like travelers and think like tourists. Many of us make that mistake when we think about our destination. We don't picture ourselves as tourists. Those of you that are thinking you'd like to see a glossy television ad about Sri Lanka or Sri Lankan tourism, when was the last time you saw a television ad? This year, when you're watching Netflix and streaming services. You're not even exposed to that sort of content. We need to perceive things through the eyes of potential travelers and understand that the travel market has radically changed, and perception of brand has changed. So this is a conversation, I think, that is quite complex, but it's one that's very important. And it is about the diversity and variety of experiences in Sri Lanka. And I know the destination well. You have a huge diversity of experiences, but they're not for everyone. But they're for particular types of people. So let's find those people and show them the brand Sri Lanka that works for them. Thanks.
Great, Damien, thank you. I will skip this since, based on what Damien mentioned, skip that question, go to John before I come to Krimali. John, how do we build the destination image? Now, according to the research by Dr. Chandral, the pre-visit analysis was clearly shown that the expectations and the imagery that they had was totally different from the post-visit. Now, is this phenomenon is only for Sri Lanka, or is it part of the activities that we should be doing to reduce the gap? Because, for example, if somebody is going to London, they know what they're expecting, and the gap might be reduced. Or if you take an Asian destination such as Thailand, so does this is a universal component that applied for managing the destination, or is it something unique to Sri Lanka which we need to work on? If that is the case, what are the type of activities that we should be doing as a destination?
Well, thanks very much, and thanks for inviting me to take part in this. I very much wish I was with you in Sri Lanka. I'm in Montreux, Switzerland, where it's 1 degree and snowing right now. Anyway, but to answer your question, I think it's difficult to get into, is this particular issue specific to Sri Lanka, or does it apply to others? I suspect it applies to other destinations. I'd actually like to come back to the thread that Damien started, which is this is about understanding the audience, who it is you're trying to reach. What do you want them to know about Sri Lanka? How do you want them? What do you want them to think about Sri Lanka? How do you want them to feel about Sri Lanka? And ultimately, what do you want them to do as a result of what you're telling them, or the images that they're seeing, the impression that they're building? So, you know, I'm a communication specialist, whereas Damien is very much a destination marketing specialist. And the way in which we've worked together quite recently has been with PATA, Pacific Asia Travel Association, and of course with Sri Lanka Tourism Development Authority as well. And we've come at it from the challenge from 2 different directions. My direction has been about how do you build an effective communication strategy so that you are delivering the right messages to the right audiences in the right way. And it's a very systematic, very intentional, and very deliberate process that has to be very carefully planned. And of course, to be truly effective, any communication strategy has to absolutely overlap the marketing strategy. The two have to fit together absolutely, so that you're amplifying the message and increasing your effectiveness rather than going off at tangents and saying different things to different people. So I think that I'm not sure I'm directly answering your question, but I think the important thing is, just to emphasize what Damien started with, you need to understand the audience. You need to understand the market that you're trying to reach, the specific demographics, and the specific niche audiences within that broader demographic, and what is it that they want from you, and then how can you actually persuade them that you have the right experiences that they're looking for. So I'll throw that back to you. I don't know, Damien, whether you want to add anything to that.
Great, John. Thank you very much. I'll just move on to Krimali to ask a question from you. Now, we have heard the research by the University of Jawaharlal, and then also what Damien mentioned about overall image management and the importance of managing this as a communication strategy from John. What has been Sri Lanka tourism approach towards the building the image of Sri Lanka? It's not that, I mean, we've lost an image, but we had an image of after the end of the war in 2010, and then slowly the tourism start coming in. But in terms of reducing that pre-expectation versus post-experience kind of a gap that was shown by Dr. Lalit, what is the approach of Sri Lanka tourism, or what are the plans currently so that the people can actually plan their vision as well around it?
Actually, thank you, Dilip. In the past, what has happened, I think there's a lot of work that has happened in the past as well, where there was promotions, sort of ad hoc promotions done right throughout. They had got bloggers, influencers to come in, and so on. But I think what happened after the war ended in 2009, there was a pent-up demand for Sri Lanka. So, you know, the tourists came in because it was a place, it was a forbidden place for 30 years. So they came in, and then we really didn't have an integrated campaign of any form for the last possibly 11 years. So going forward, what we're going to look at is, I think Damien mentioned this before, is that we're looking at something different from is that we will look at experiences rather than looking at countries. Now, In the past, we used to promote India or China or UK or whatever. We used to promote a nationality actually. So I think we're going to move away, and we've already started moving away, and we're looking at experiences, whether it's wellness, Ayurveda, whether it's adventure, you know, the food, the culture, and so on. So that is an area that even our institution is made according to marketing for countries. So it's a gradual process, and the team is gradually moving towards creating sort of experience-based promotion and branding of Sri Lanka. That's one area actually that we are looking at. But also I think that the Millennium Traveler, which was mentioned, and the people who are not Millennium Travelers, but who are like myself, way older than a millennium, but we look for experiences. And I think it was mentioned that the change happened before COVID, and people say, you know, mass scale tourism has changed, that's not going to happen anymore because of COVID. But frankly, from the Sri Lankan context, for the last 5-6 years, you could see that the trend had already changed. Because you have in Sri Lanka tourism, we have about 2,000, 2,500 registered accommodation, and in reality there are about 20,000 plus who are not registered. They were working purely with OTAs, you know. So that change already happened for Sri Lanka, and I think that we possibly didn't, you know, address it enough. And I think it's time that the change has already come. We got to change the way we do things. And we have already a strategy, a research roadmap going forward, how we are going to address all this. We are looking at the areas of several areas. I mean, in fact, the doctor mentioned the security angle of things, and that obviously from a government perspective, that's a concern. And for the first time, actually, the government appointed a DIG for tourism. And now we are opening up branches in the tourist areas. We are looking at the lighting. We are looking at having like several on the beach and several areas. So these are areas that we are looking at going forward.
Thank you, Krumali. Thank you for that explanation. I'll move on to Damien. Damien, it says in marketing, you know, that it says that it is shameful to lose a good reputation than not being able to acquire one at all. So the research which done by doctor and the team from University of Sri Jawaharlal says that the post-visit findings have revealed that, you know, there are areas such as actually need to improve, like personal safety, road safety, tour guiding, local transportation, tourist information services, shopping avenues, the nightlife. Now, what needs to be done to bring these elements to the proposed campaign? Is that do we lack those, and that is a result of being reflected in the mindset of the traveler, or we have not been able to communicate whatever that we have into some extent? If you look at it, you know, there is a little bit of shopping and the tourist information, there is somewhat available. So it's, what do we do to, is it critical at this moment, or is it something that we can actively incorporate into the proposed campaigns that have been planned by the Tourism Authority?
That's a good question. I think it comes back a little bit to what I was saying earlier about look through the eyes of a traveler. It's a difficult thing to do, particularly when you live in a country, you perceive the as a citizen. Many of us get caught up on things like roads and services. They're very important for us, but they're certainly not a decision-making element for travelers and tourism. Nobody chooses to go to a country because it has good roads. And it's certainly not the first thing you think about when you want to plan a trip somewhere. We're not sitting at home and say to our partner, you know, where would you like to go this year? Well, somewhere with really good roads. That inspiration level is where brand sits, and that is an emotional part of your brain that makes that decision to travel somewhere, not the rational part of your brain that thinks about roads or even airfares or visas or any of the issues. They're important, but they're also an assumption that travelers make that the roads will be drivable, that things will work while they're there. We need to make sure that those things do exist, because when they don't, that's when you get a negative backlash against businesses and against the destination. But it's not the front end of marketing. promoting yourself as having good roads is never going to work. We're seeing a massive amount of people making mistakes right now in the post-COVID space with ads saying we're safe. I've seen so many today, safe Turkey, healthy Turkey, safe India, safe that. Safety is not a marketing message, it's an assumption that travelers have. If this had been as we know, unfortunately know in Sri Lanka and many destinations I work with, we've been through the experience of a terror attack. If COVID had been a terror attack, would we have marketed ourselves constantly as we're safe, our security is amazing, we have soldiers in every hotel? Would we have made ads showing the armed forces and police in our ads? Never. We can't just market off the back of safety. We can't market off the back of infrastructure. That's not marketing. That's an assumption, and we make sure that our product development side addresses those issues. But we really need the initial emotional inspiration to come to Sri Lanka, and that is to come back to Chairwoman Kamali's stressing this experience. It has to be the positive experience of the destination. Yes, that infrastructure will make sure that it's an easy experience to have, but that's not the essence of the experience, is the smoothness of the road you're driving on, or the water supply, or how many COVID protocols are in a hotel. The positive experience, the positive emotional response to the destination has to be there. Also, just on that issue, we mustn't lose sight of who we are as a destination and what our core values are. We talk about nightlife and nightclubs and shopping. Is that really Sri Lanka? And is that the Sri Lanka that tourists are looking for? People talk about the rise of shopping tourism, but every destination that markets itself as a shopping destination, their biggest competitor isn't another destination. Their biggest competitor is Amazon, because no destination is selling any goods as cheap as Amazon can. And for someone to travel specifically to a destination just to shop, that puts you in league with destinations like Dubai. Well, they're wildly successful, aren't they? Are they really? Their average length of stay is 1.5 nights. Do we want tourists in Sri Lanka for that length of time? They're a stopover or fly-through destination, which is where you often find shopping tourism connected to. Singapore, for example, moved away from that shopping image when they realized it was extremely limiting. Similarly with nightclubs, are people really coming to Sri Lanka because they want to go to a nightclub? Is that a core part of the value of the brand? We need to make sure that we retain our value of what those experiences are in Sri Lanka. And some of the things that came out in that presentation are definitely there. Ecotourism, green tourism, wellness, which is a huge consideration now for people traveling post-COVID. Will I be somewhere where I'm relatively spaced, where I can go for spa treatments, where I feel healthier about my travel experience? Adventure tourism, which Sri Lanka has a huge opportunity for. Hiking, outdoor activities. These are the activities that will appeal to this new market. We need to make sure we communicate those. The infrastructure and the ability to travel is critically important, but it's not really part of the brand image. It's a traveler assumption. Thanks.
Thank you, Damien. Thanks. Kamal, taking a cue from what Damien mentioned, now this means that everyone is talking about experiences. Everyone is talking about experiential travel. Is there any plans from tourism side to incorporate the experiential for marketing as well as development of such elements, so that people can really come and experience something unique, what Damien was talking about?
Absolutely. One particular one is the wellness that Damien, I think, mentioned, that we are focusing on immediately for obvious reason post-COVID. So the EU actually is providing us funding for this. Research has been done actually in the German market, which is about 90 million people, and we are continuing with the additional markets, few other markets as well. And thereafter, we will be going ahead with the procurement process and so on for the promotion angle. Now, it is not only the promotion, but also the product. So for government, actually, we create an environment. We will market wellness. We will promote wellness. We will get that across to the global traveler. But going forward, what needs is that the private sector needs to create the products. The products is where they give the products and the services. So that is something that we are looking at. The adventure is another area that we are looking at in terms of the enabling it, rather in the registration process and all that. Another key area which we are working on is the film tourism. The film tourism is an interesting area that lots of films, documentaries and so on have come even the last year, the years before. And we have now created, we are in the process of creating a one-stop shop for documentaries and so on. So that is another area that we are looking at, adventure, wildlife, we know. As you know, that we did the couch safari recently with I think our there was about 7 million viewers for the couch safari, showing our wildlife to the world. So these are things that we are going to do more of, the digital side of it, less so on advertisements and what have you, and magazines and so on. Yes, we have to be in magazines as well. We have to be in magazines as well, we have to be in the newspaper and so on. We have to balance this out. In the past, a lot of effort was put in, being in trade shows and so on. Now with COVID, I suppose most of them are sort of now online. We will continue to do that as well and work very closely with the tour operators and the travel agents who have supported us right throughout the years. But however, we will also go towards the digital side of things and use this opportunity to reposition Sri Lanka. I think this is a great opportunity for us, and I think we're going to grab that, and we are going to look forward for the private sector really to assist us.
Thank you very much, Kamal. It's a combination of all stakeholders that should co-create the image of the destination. Damien, I'll just move on to, before I go into Jean. Morgan and Pitcher, well-known academics in destination marketing, they have made something very interesting as early as 2002, according to the research report. They says, there are many destinations have similar amenities and offers, such as excellent 5-star resorts, hotels, stunning beautiful attractions, unique outlets, heritage, and thereby making it very, very difficult to differentiate, and the differentiation is becoming less effective. Now, in a marketplace cluttered as such that everyone is claiming something unique but it is not unique, what should be the strategy of Sri Lanka tourism to project something unique at the pre-arrival stage so that our conversions can be much better? I remember in 2010 when a global research that was done, our awareness was as a destination was around 100%, but when it came to actual purchase from a known mature destination such as UK, it came down to 1%. So Damien, can you, you were talking about the importance of experiences in this context of destination differentiation and adding that into the communication strategy so that the image can improve. Can you name few specific things that can be incorporated into our overall strategy?
Sure. I don't want to keep harping back to the same point, but again, it relates here again. The actual character, the unique attributes of Sri Lanka are absolutely essential, because you're right, there is a lot of replication in destination marketing that we see, the same sort of material being used, the same sort of image, the couple clicking their glasses in front of a sunset, those sort of generic experiences. When we work on a destination strategy, we always start at the very basic level of an audit of products, what is available in Sri Lanka. You then look at destinations that have other similar products or experiences, and you look for what is the competing edge that Sri Lanka has against those destinations, against those experiences. From that, you start to get some marketing values. Why is your wellness product different to wellness experiences in Bali or other similar destinations? Why is your wildlife tourism different to the wildlife experience in Africa? It's very different, but how? And from that, you start to develop those unique attributes. Once you get those attributes that are purely Sri Lankan, particularly those related to things that only exist in Sri Lanka, they're not going to find Sigiriya in another country. They're not going to find Dambulla in another country. You start to get a sense of those unique experiences and those unique offerings. And so as you move up the pyramid from what makes us a destination, what makes us a tourism destination, to what makes us a competitive tourism destination, the very peak is what makes us unique. And that peak of that pyramid is where you find your brand. And that's where you conduct your branding exercises. What is the unique character that you have. And it has to be about what is uniquely Sri Lankan and what those positive attributes that you genuinely have at a cultural level, at a natural level, at an attraction level are. When destinations when I hear destinations say things like, we could be the next Dubai. Well, how about you be the current Sri Lanka or the current destination that you are, but the best Sri Lanka that you can be, and sell what it is that you're uniquely offering. And also, it's about valuing those unique experiences as well. That's a critical part always of the destination marketing equation. I've seen some of the comments coming through here where people have said, we should reduce our prices to bring tourism back post-COVID. That's a mistake. The worst thing that could happen to tourism emerging from COVID is a race to the bottom, as it's called, of people undercutting each other on price. If you have so many thousand rooms in Sri Lanka that you can't fill, well, maybe we'll fill them in the next year or two, but let's reduce the numbers that we have in terms of offering, but increase the prices so that we meet that reduced demand with a higher value supply and find the right equilibrium to actually restore the economy, the tourism economy, and make sure that we've got sufficient investment and revenue in building up and improving rather than a damaging price war. So I think it's about that competitive edge, not just at price, but in terms of brand value, pushing those unique attributes and making sure that you value it and make sure that it's a brand value in terms of the values of the destination, your beliefs, your culture, and the financial value as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Damien. Thank you. Those who are joining just now, please on Zoom, please you can actually share your questions. Go to the chat function, Q&A box, and then send us the questions. We'll be actually taking those questions in the last 20 minutes of this webinar. And if you also can go to your Facebook, or you can ask your questions via slido.com using the hashtag Sri Lanka Tourism. So we'll be panel will be actually more delighted to answer some of the questions. So with that, I will just move on to John. John, it says that 3S products, which is traditionally known as sea, sand and sun, are becoming easily replaceable, and the differentiation of those products are becoming more and more difficult at the moment. But if you look at Sri Lanka as an island, primarily the Sri Lankan numbers are more into 3S products than otherwise. If you look at it, only about 28 or 29% of the arrivals goes to Elephant Orphanage or at least Kandy area. Only about 30% goes to Sigiriya National Parks, around 16% of the total arrivals. So the predominantly, our 60% of the travelers are still in the coastal area. More than 70% of our accommodation is also in the coastal area. So which means that Sri Lanka is now still serving as a 3S product, predominantly selling its beaches, etc. Do you think that we should deviate from this strategy, or is there any dual strategy or any other action that we need to pursue from a communication perspective considering the product that we have in hand? What's your view on it?
Well, I think, again, I'll just come back to what Damien's already said without wanting to hammer the point too much. It really comes down to differentiation. Look, sea and sand is still important, but many other destinations offer that. So it's not to say you ignore it and you stop serving that part of the market if there's still a market there that wants to come to Sri Lanka for that. It's a question of finding the other things which competing destinations don't offer and can't offer. And as Damien said, that's where you concentrate your marketing efforts. When it comes to communicating the experiences that you can offer, when you're looking at the millennial market, and as Damien said, the market is changing. It's about what the millennial travelers now want and how they consume and how they receive information. The way they receive it now is online. And primarily, you need to look at two facets of that. One is content. Content has got to be the core of any communication strategy. That might be video content, it might be graphic content, photographs, etc. But content is really where it's at, and it's got to be really compelling content. It's got to draw eyeballs. It's got to be something that people want to look at and want to share, because that's how you now amplify your messages online. The second thing is word of mouth. The single most important and powerful form of marketing is word of mouth. I mean, look at why do you think TripAdvisor is so important? So when people come to Sri Lanka and they come for an experience and they've had a good experience, they will talk about it. They will post the photographs. They will post their comments. They will show people. They will show all their friends what they've been doing. That's what you want. You want that kind of positive word of mouth going out there. Now, one way of doing that is to attract people who have a large following, so that when they share content, their own content online, it's seen by a lot of people, and specifically the demographics, the parts of the audience that you want to reach. So what I'm talking about here is developing an influencer strategy. Now, if you look at your near neighbors in the Maldives, for example, they spend a lot of time and effort on an influencer strategy. Now, you can quibble about the type of influencers they choose, but they, for example, when they're targeting the UK market, as we saw when we did some training recently with SLTDA, and we looked at some examples of the kind of influencers that they've chosen to work with. They are what you might call politely Z-level, Z-list celebrities, but nonetheless they are people who have a large following. They're models and actresses and whatever, but they have a lot of people who follow them and who look at what they're doing, and so they invite those people to the Maldives and they show them enjoying the beaches and enjoying the other attractions that the Maldives has, and it gets a lot of play. So look at an influencer strategy, but make sure that that strategy is aligned with the specific audiences that you're trying to target. The people who want to come to Sri Lanka to sample your wellness product, for example, or who want to look at your wildlife, and in some cases who want to come and experience sun and sea and sand. Those are very different market segments, and so you need to choose influencers who will allow you to engage through them with the people who want to do that. So I hope that's answered your question, but I'll take it back to you.
Okay, John, thank you very much. That gives you a clarity on that particular question. Damien, I will move on to that question again back to you. So this is the time that we are looking at almost a post-COVID communication strategy. In a post-COVID destination communication strategy, do you think it should completely be different from what destination has been doing in the past, especially with regards to your positioning statement and how do you want to position? We talked about the experiences, we talked about the millennials, we talked about creating something unique for Sri Lanka, etc. So we covered all that in detail. But do you think in developing advertising communication strategy on a post-COVID era, that is there anything special or any elements that we should look in, what we didn't look at before, or has it completely changed?
I mean, it's obviously what everybody is talking about now. Firstly, it's getting a sense of what this recovery is going to look like. We can't fall into false optimism. There's been a lot of that in the last week where everyone sees the vaccine is here, but we need to look at how realistic it is in terms of timing of the actual access of that vaccine to the most of the world's population. In the EU, they're still talking about Q3 of next year. The US is still talking about Q3 of next year by the time they get through all the approvals required and systems. The UK, obviously through Brexit, has managed to separate themselves and go a bit early, but still there's time needed for the general population to have it. But also what we forget is it's not just the population of those countries, it's the countries they're going to travel to. Where people need to be vaccinated as well against risk, particularly when it comes to the quarantine element. So we need to be realistic in terms of time frame for recovery. We're not talking about everyone will be vaccinated by Christmas, whereas we'll be back to normal by January. That's never going to happen. But what is most important, you started Dilip, by talking about there being a light at the end of the tunnel with the vaccine. Yes, there is. But the thing about tunnels is, as I always say, you come out in a different place than where you went in. We are never going back to 2019. As I said, those changes were already there in 2019. The impact of the millennial markets, the breakdown of mass tourism was already happening. Where there is a massive risk is if we try and bring back mass tourism first. Whether or not even it has a future is questionable given the changing markets. But if you want to reassure every single market that could fill package hotels or meet the needs of mass tourism, you'll be waiting a very long time. But you have millennial, younger, risk-averse niche travelers, less risk-averse niche travelers who are ready to travel now. who are ready to come as soon as you open. And by targeting them and giving them the experiences that they want, you're going to start to grow back tourism. So again, and I'm sorry, John and I keep coming back to the same points, it's about segmenting those markets, specializing on those niches. It can't be one big brand, Sri Lanka's safe, Sri Lanka's open, come back message. We cannot fall into trying to meet the needs of the mass tourism market. That means a lot of partnership and engagement with your industry to make them understand that too. We can't let people dwell in fantasy. We're not going to fill thousands of hotel beds in next year. We have to be realistic about what's likely to come back. Businesses may have to downsize, may have to scale down. But as I said, reassess their value and increase their pricing to sell less rooms, more space, better experiences at a higher value. So it's a communication strategy, yes, but we also need a management strategy in the destination to make sure that we have a realistic ability to revive the tourism economy and understand that we're dealing with different markets. We can't keep falling back on those old models at a communications level, print ads, television commercials, at a management level, trade shows. I still hear people talking about, what are we going to do about, our trade shows? Trade shows are gone. No WTM, no ITB next year. Most of them have shifted online, and if you've been attending them, they don't really work because you're taking a trade show model and trying to transfer it into the internet, and it by and large doesn't work. As I said to someone the other day, it's a bit like when cars replaced horses. You climb on the roof of the car and say, giddy up. It doesn't work. Things of the new world, and we can't just take those old models and try and recreate them. So there's a massive amount of rethinking and revisioning that has to happen at a strategic level as you look towards a recovery campaign. It cannot just be, let's go back to 2019, because as much as some businesses want that, all that wanting is not going to change reality. As the current occupant of the White House is learning, you can't fight reality and you can't fight change when it's knocking on your door. And as the market reopens, that's what we're going to see. We're going to see a new travel market and a new travel marketplace that we need to be active in. So let's make sure that you've got the right experiences at the right value targeted to those right customers. Thanks.
Thank you, Damien. Thanks. Krimalia, different question to you. Now, we come for these webinars and we tell all these things and, we talked about it in detail. And at the end of the day, somebody has to do the work. That somebody is, unfortunately or fortunate, is you. So what are the barriers and the difficulties that you see, especially considering that Sri Lanka actually, even the last so many years, had really faced the difficulty of coming out with an integrated campaign. You yourself mentioned at the beginning of the discussion, and there could have been reasons for that as well. For over a decade, we were not being compared to Thailand, Malaysia, India, and we were not being able to see. And as a result, the research very clearly came out and said that we were not being able to establish the true image of Sri Lanka at the pre-arrival stage. What is the game plan for you to overcome this? And then what is kind of a role and a support that you need for your stakeholders? We have private sector, we have academics, etc. So how do I know that it's not something you can do alone? So what's your game plan and what support you need to make it a reality after COVID?
Yeah, thank you, Dilip. Yes, for the last 10 years, it couldn't be done because it's tough. The procedures, we have to follow government procurement procedures, which is very cumbersome. However, the good news is that we've got the cabinet approval early on, just before COVID, for a 5-year integrated campaign. We have already completed all the terms of reference, and now it is going to the tech committee. So the tech committee consists of government servants who have experience in those particular fields. So we will be having the tech committee meeting actually next week. That's the good news. However, the challenge is a little bit that the government procedures, the tender procedures and so on, is not always, doesn't cater for promotion. So it's not like building a road or something where you can say so many kilometers and whatever. So the procedures are a little bit not catering for us. Having said that, what we do internally is that we network through the government system to try to get things done, because if you just follow procedures, just wait for it to happen, So what we do is we talk to various people in the government to get it fast tracked. From the private sector perspective, I mean the product and service is with you guys, right? So I would appeal to all of you, while we do the promotion side of it, whether it is the global promotion campaign which we'll implement early next year, or whether we go on live streaming or any of these activities, support us. You know, there's some of you who are not willing to accept the change, I think. And you know, we will help you, we will partner you. There are certain areas that you will have dealing with government's issues in terms of trying to get approvals or get things done. Reach out to us, we will help you through any kind of issues that you have. Now there are lots of regulations that were there for the last 20-30 years, which this year alone we relooked and changed several of them. That's one of the reasons that the increase in registration went up from the informal sector to the formal sector by about 34%. So we are here to, the whole process of this government is to, it's a people-centric economy. So people-centric tourism, we are supposed to re-engineer all the processes which we are going through, internal sort of procedures we have gone through. Technology is now being used, everything is now online in terms of registration. Some of you may already know that we've already created a the first tourism mobile app in the history of tourism. That has already been made with the support of UNDP. That will be incorporated into the immigration application form. That would cater for the COVID kind of protocol requirements really. And then the next version, which already the terms of reference are done, that would include all the 4,956 sites that we have identified, the emergency button to the police, you know, camping, hiking, all that. We will have the content. Actually, ADB has kindly agreed to do the content management, content side of it, and the World Bank on the technical side. So from the private sector perspective, I'm saying, you know, we have 52 associations. Not everybody sort of is on the same page, by in a way, that's the way the industry will work. But there is obviously push and pull. But overall, I appeal to all of you in the private sector, please support the government, embrace the change that frankly we are forced to make. I think John and Damien had very eloquently explained. I think we don't really have a choice in what we have to do going forward in terms of digital marketing, the experiences, not sort of competing with each other on pricing, but to compete on products and something different, come up with the you know, sustainable side of it. I mean, we've actually changed the guideline. The new projects going forward for Sri Lanka tourism would include a sustainable element of it, whether it's renewable energy or whether it is recycling of water, zero plastic and so on. We are working with Cultural Fund now. We have just initiated the discussion to make Sigiriya the first sustainable destination in Sri Lanka, and Yala Palutupana to look at a conservancy like in East Africa actually. So from the government's perspective, you know, despite COVID, a lot has been done, and we will continue to do that. And I look to every single member of the private sector, whether it is a big company, because majority of our tourism industry is about 88% is SMEs. So each and every one of you in the SME sector, the larger companies, the tour guides, which we are actually improving the training and so on. Actually, the initiation has started on that. The drivers and everybody who is directly and indirectly involved in tourism, please help us to make this change, and anytime reach out to us. We are there to help you through anything, any issues that you have. We are always there to help you.
Thank you, Krumali. Thank you. There are a lot of questions coming in, but we'll take it later since we have a little limitation in the time. Damien, I will just, sorry, John, I will get into basically another question for you. The importance of brand health studies. You know, in a commercial brand, we also do it what we call annual brand health studies, what people are looking at it, you know, what the perceptions are. And this is the first time, I think, after about 10 years that such a study has been done for Sri Lanka brand, just to understand where we are. how important such brand health related studies and what would be the frequency that we should conduct such studies so that it can actually bring elements into the proposed campaign?
Well, that's a good question. I think I'll answer it in a slightly different way, which is to say that research is very important because you need to understand the audiences and what they want and how they're reacting to what you're saying and the content that you're sharing with them. In terms of brand health studies, I mean, I would lump that in together because when you say the brand health study is about how are we doing, it's about how are we doing with these audiences, how are they actually viewing us and the experiences that we're offering them. I think the bedrock of any communication campaign, any marketing campaign, is identifying, as I've said before, who is it that you're actually trying to reach? What do you want them to know, to think, to feel, to do, and then also to benchmark your effectiveness by doing research into what are the impressions now, and then repeat that periodically during the course of the campaign, not just at the end of it, to see what's working and what's not. How are they actually responding to it? So I think research is very, very important. I'll come back to another point that Kamali made a moment ago about delivering the experience, actually making sure that you're following through on the promises that you're making. So when you're talking about the quality of experiences you can offer, that in fact, when people come to Sri Lanka and they experience those destinations or those products, they actually are experiencing something as good as, if not better, than they were led to expect, not something that didn't work or that wasn't up to their expectation. Because just as word of mouth can work for you in a very positive way, it can also do the opposite. So if people come to Sri Lanka and they have a poor experience, they will then share the results of that poor experience with all their followers online, therefore undermining the efforts that you're trying to make. So authenticity is key, actually delivering on the promises that you're making, and understanding what it is that the audiences want, and then how they're actually responding to the messaging that you're delivering. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, very clear. Damien, there is in the research, it talks about two aspects of images. One is basically, they call it actually how the images are formed, and one is through your conscious effort of advertising, your marketing, PR activities, etc. So conscious effort of making the advertising or the promotion. So generally, which is what we call the paid advertising by the NTO. And the second one, which is actually more organic in nature. So the two types of images that you're looking at it. So the one is the induced image, the other one is we call organic image based on the research. Now, we know that most of the organic images are coming from natural instinct and natural behavior of tourists. And we also know that the role which a lot of flashpackers or sometimes the backpackers who play a role in creating this organic content that is required for the destination also. On the other hand, we run some expensive campaigns, and you also mentioned that the future of travel fairs is actually going to be very bleak in the future. I know the ITB is cancelled, WTM is also cancelled, and more people are moving to the digital arena, and then how is that going to work? So, and also a destination from Sri Lanka's perspective, there was a heavy focus on B2B. A lot of travel fairs that took a lot of money was spent, and that was a strategy that had been there for the last 5-6 years, and then a lot of campaigns oriented ones, etc. So from a destination image creation perspective, looking at the research, what they are coming out of this, where it's basically induced versus organic image, can we strike a balance between the two, and which one is more important than the others, and do we actually can really create one than compared to the other, which is more cost effective?
That's a really good question. To answer that, I'd just put it this way, and I'm sure many of the audience are tourist business people here. Let's rewind back some years. If someone in Sri Lanka wanted to market their hotel, for example, they would have hired a marketing firm to do that. Those guys would have charged them to come to their hotel with a professional photographer. You would have paid for every photo that was taken, to show the rooms, to show the view, to show the experiences there, the food, everything. You would then have bought channels to put that content into, to get brochures into people's hands, to put television commercials on TV, to put billboards up, and you would have no idea how many people saw those, except maybe the viewership of or readership of a magazine. But you don't know how many people actually saw that ad. And you would have paid for that whole process. Marketing company, for their ideas, for their taking the photos, for their publication of that content online. The mindset that we need to understand is, you currently have guests coming to your hotels who are paying you. The first thing they do on arrival when they see how beautiful your hotel is take out their phone and start taking photos of it. And they make sure it's the best possible photo that they can take. They then take those photos because they want to brag and show off to their friends, and they post them. So they put them into a media channel, the same that you used to pay for free. They expose them on average to 200 people each. Think about that multiplied by all of your thousands of tourists. To people who don't feel they're being sold to. They're not seeing ads, they're seeing genuine content from family and friends, and they're responding to that. That simple shift has revolutionized the world of marketing, but we're very slow to understand this because we don't see it when it's happening. We can facilitate it happening. But we're not seeing it happening. It's much easier to go back to a minister and say, look, we put an ad on the side of a bus in London. Here's a picture of it. We put an ad on CNN, and this many people watch CNN. They're seeing nothing but terrorism, war, and Donald Trump, but they might have seen this ad in that process. And somewhere in all that negativity, they might have thought about a holiday. So that organic, if you want to call it, or user-generated marketing is so much more powerful. But we don't just have to let it happen in isolation. There are means and technologies that let us take advantage of that through what we call aggregation. There's software that can pull together all of that content. Australia started this many years ago now. They're one of the first destinations to do it. Communitization of the destination. They started using aggregation tools to pull together all those publicly posted Instagram photos and Facebook photos and content, and then purposing and repurposing that with permission of the user into marketing material. And it's what 90% of their digital content now is. Not from professional photographers, not from filmmakers, but from actual visitors to the country. Influencers can be useful, as John said, but choose them carefully. Don't just bring someone to the country that wants to stand by a pool with a glass of champagne in their hand. Because guess what? Every tourist does that, and they influence their family and friends. Influencers work when it's someone who has a large following specialized to a particular interest. I've done a lot in the adventure travel space. There are certain hikers, if you get them on a trail, people will respond to that, and you know it because they're given backpacks and gear, and they represent brands as well because they've got that credibility. So we can have that pure organic content that we aggregate and repurpose as marketing material. We can have that qualified influencer content that we use. And then we can look at some of that media buying potential as well. But it should be about amplifying that organic or user-generated content. We really do have to understand that the market has changed. Why did we spend so much time in travel shows? Because tour operators told us to. We're now seeing a shift towards fully independent travelers. How do you access an independent traveler through a trade show? Do you really think people in London go to WTM, the public, to look and decide where they're going to travel and walk around and collect brochures? Why? Firstly, it's in the middle of nowhere out at Canary Wharf. And secondly, people don't book or buy travel that way. Think about the way that you see places you're going to visit. You're seeing them online. And how many times have you seen an Instagram photo from one of your friends or family and thought, wow, I'd like to go there? That's marketing now. We're getting caught up in these old school models because they work for certain types of businesses, which themselves are changing. Now, I'm sure there's some tour operators in the audience that are saying, someone cut this guy's microphone off because he's saying that tour operators don't have a role anymore or shouldn't be the focus of our destination. That's absolutely not true. There's more of a role of tour operators than ever before. But it's a different form of provision of tours. The largest investment in technology and travel in the last 5 years has been into the tour operator space, but it's a new form of tour operations. It's what we call in-destination access to experiences. It is people with their smartphones that wake up in the morning once they've traveled independently to a country and say, what am I going to do today? Open up their phone and find local businesses that can give them a cultural experience, a food, cooking experience, an adventure, a hike, anything like that. Sometimes a multi-day experience, but they find it when they're already there in destination. And that shift again is happening. Go back to pre-COVID. 20% of active travel options were booked, not months in advance, not weeks in advance. 20% of them were booked on the same day that people had that experience because they found them through their phones. And we've seen heavy investment into those platforms that enable tour operators to list product online and for individual independent travelers to find them. And we know that's the future because if you look at those platforms, they're increasingly being bought by the bigger players. Some of the software that enables tour operators to do that has been bought by Booking.com, by TripAdvisor, we bought Broken, by Fair Harbor that was acquired by Booking.com. Those in-destination experience booking platforms are now a critical part of the business equation. We can see that that's the future. So yes, we need to look at this new business environment. We need to look at what works when it comes to driving people into it. And it is predominantly that organic user-generated content from other travelers and tourists. It's not that commercial material. As I started saying earlier before, think about your own experiences. How many TV commercials are you even seeing these days? Netflix has no advertising. Most streaming services have no advertising. So why would we even?
Yes, Damien, I think we lost you slightly there, but I'll quickly move into John. One more question. I think there are a lot of questions coming in, so we need to actually release some time. Don't forget to ask your question. Just get into the, if you're in the Zoom, please go to the Q&A and chat function, or if you're on, joining on the Facebook, just go and ask your questions, or go to slido.com using the hashtag Sri Lanka Tourism, where you can ask all the questions. John, one question which I'd like to basically, before we get into the Q&A, is that in the research which you done by the university, they talked about there are some strongly associated certain images, such as they're talking about happy, joyful, pleasant, exciting and amazing and relaxing. These are the ones which comes in terms of post experience. Now, when we analyze according to the research, when we analyze the destination communication messaging strategy, it does not come out, those elements were not coming out. So what we had was like a picture of a rock or a picture of a certain place, a man-made or natural attraction mostly, and then we were actually showcasing from that. So has the world destination marketing or communication shifted from showing man-made or natural attractions for people to come and take a picture, or we are now showing more and more emotions so that they would actually reflect that and associate it for that particular feeling and come? What's your view on that?
Yeah, well, I hesitate to keep on repeating what we've already said and what Damien's already said, but it is, what you're referring to there is the reactions that people have expressed when they've come to Sri Lanka and they have experienced themselves what you have to offer. That is absolute gold. If people come to Sri Lanka and they have a great experience, whether it's a wellness experience, it's a culinary experience, it's wildlife, whatever it may be, and they're willing to say how amazing it was, and they share that experience with their friends and family online, that is absolute gold dust. And it is absolutely what should be the core of your marketing. Now, that's not to say there is not still a place for beautiful images of cultural attractions, beautiful images of the landscape, etc. But the core of the marketing and the communication must be content, and that content has to be authentic. And what is more authentic than user-generated content that is provided by people who've been there themselves and seen it? Because word of mouth is so powerful. I'll just pick up again on a point that Damien referred to, which is influencers, qualifying influencers. I used to run a PR agency in Singapore, and one of our clients, our biggest client, in fact, was the world's largest manufacturer of fast-moving consumer goods. And they're all in on content marketing and influencer strategy, whether it's a shampoo brand or whatever it may be. And so we used to spend a lot of time qualifying influencers. And there's a very simple methodology for doing that, which is, yes, it's about reach. It's about how many followers that particular influencer has. But much more important is their credibility with that audience. So, as I mentioned in the session we did with SLTDA, Kim Kardashian West is the queen of the internet. She's the most famous influencer of all, more than 200 million followers. Is she the right influencer to promote a wellness product in Sri Lanka? I'd suggest probably not. So you need to look at people who've got credibility with their audience. Actually, micro influencers are very, very important, because there are people who are passionate about a particular topic or a particular subject or a particular destination, for example, and they are followed by people who are equally passionate, because that's why they're following them. So those people have credibility. So identifying those people who have, yes, they have a significant following, but they have credibility with that following because they are genuinely knowledgeable and genuinely enthusiastic about that topic. And that then gives you relevant resonance with that particular audience. So if you then work with that influencer, you're working through them to target a very specific subset of the overall demographic, a very specific niche audience who might be interested in a culinary experience in Sri Lanka, for example, or a wellness experience. And one other thing I'll pick up on just very quickly, and again, David mentioned it, it's about valuing the unique, what makes you unique, and actually pushing your market up, pushing your pricing level upwards. A very good example of this is a country I in fact grew up in, which is Botswana in Southern Africa. Now they have an absolute jewel, which is the Okavango Delta, which is an absolutely unique landscape. And what they have done very deliberately is they have avoided the mass market. This was way before COVID. They've avoided mass market tourism and made it very niche and very selective and very expensive. And they've very strictly controlled the number of operators and the number of visitors who can go into the parks like the Saluti or the Moremi Game Reserve. And so consequently, when you go there, you get an absolutely unique experience because it is not, if you see a Pride of Lions, you're not surrounded by 20 other vehicles, you're there by yourself. And so that, that's just a very small example of if you have something really unique and you value it and you preserve it, you can actually upsell it and make it very, very to a very specific audience.
Thank you, John. Just one more question before we move into the question and answers. Damien, we know the battle of slogans by destinations. And this is very, very famous because most of the people think destination market equals the slogan, and the culmination of destination marketing is a creation of the slogan. And we have gone through many. And when we looked at it very carefully, I was for this particular purpose looking at so-called the most successful slogan that is available, Incredible India. But when I really reflect on it, has it really changed the image of India, or has it really changed the way we think of India for the last 20 years? The answer for me is no, but it has given some edge. Now, this is a very sensitive subject because people take pride in it, so because they think that most of the time destination market equals to the slogan. What is your view and recommendation on how to navigate thinking the sensitivity of the people and the stakeholders, as well as the stereotyping of slogans in terms of destination marketing?
Hi. Sorry for getting cut off before as well. Your system seemed cut out from under me. Yeah, I mean, look, there's nothing wrong with a good strapline or a good slogan. And people do remember some of them, like India's obviously got a memorable one. I think that's more to do with their volume of advertising around it, possibly. Malaysia as well. But the vast majority of them aren't known, and I think it's much more important as a corporate tool for a DMO or a tourist board. What it gives you is some sense of the brand and some sense of the way that you want to communicate, a messaging manual almost, that you can tie back to that central message or concept that you have. But whether or not a slogan has ever really influenced anyone to travel to a country, I don't think. I've seen some very interesting research where people were asked as in departure lounges of airports to name the slogan of the destination they were leaving or draw the logo, and the vast majority of them could not do either. Think of the last country you visited and tell me if you can remember its slogan or draw its logo. But those things are good as corporate messages. As I say, that is the brand of your tourist board more than the brand of the country. And what it does, it defines their approach to messaging the destination, which is important. And the logo is something they can use to identify themselves, definitely. But in terms of it actually inspiring people to travel, I don't think so. It's more of an expression of the central brand value that you have for the destination. I would suggest. But branding and marketing is a lot more complex than the simplicity of a pretty logo and a strap line. There's a lot more to it than that. There's been some work done looking into it. Apparently they say that millennial travelers don't like prescriptive branding, meaning that if they're told things like visit Taiwan, they'll say why. Love New York. What if I don't? They don't. It comes down to don't tell me what to do. Don't give me a prescription and tell me what I have to do. They prefer adjectives. Things someone that gives them a sense of the country. But I really do think that a lot of DMOs get too bogged down in that. It's a branding exercise that can be done initially. It expresses your corporate values. But someone actually being inspired to travel to Sri Lanka, someone finding experiences they want to have there, someone finding who can give them to them, is a much more complex process than just a single word or an image.
Thank you, Damien. Thank you for that. Since we got a lot of questions, I think we'll just start with Kumali. I think there's a question comes in. The first question is, should the airport tax be removed, at least temporarily?
The embarkation.
The embarkation tax, that's there.
At the moment, that decision has not been made, but what we are looking at is for the visa, which is normally $35 and $25 if you're a SAARC country. Normally you would have got a visa for 1 month, but we have suggested to the cabinet that the visa should be given for 6 months itself. So that's something we are looking at.
All right, thank you. Another question. I was a trainee at the SLTPB, and I have to say that the systems there is very slow. Is there a plan on restructuring?
Is it the?
I was a trainee at the
trainee.
SLTPB,
Okay.
and I have to say that the system there is slow. Do they plan on restructuring?
Absolutely. There is a plan on restructuring. In fact, as I mentioned before as well, on the whole model we will change completely actually. We brought in some new fresh blood as well. We're sponsored by some of the funding agencies as well. The organization has been there for the last 50 odd years, and historically it has got politicized and so on. So it's a process that we have to go through, and I believe the team is ready to do that.
Thank you. I'll just move to Damien for one more question. Damien, the question is that should we use digital tools more to help boost the industry rather than depending on the more traditional tools? I mean, you explained that, but if you say that is the case, can you just recommend some of the strategies?
Of course, yes. I mean, digital had become the predominant channel for travel pre-COVID, and now it's even more so. There's been a 71% increase of digital consumption this year because of the lockdowns. One of the things it's done it's taken even those offline travelers that we had and forced them online. People have been, even those reluctant people that weren't using online tools this year discovered them through necessity. So it really is the most important realm. We need to look, before we even talk about techniques, look at budget allocations. Any DMO that's spending more on other forms of marketing than digital, that's the first nut to crack and say, why on earth would you be doing that? Particularly when you look at how incredibly better value you get for digital, what you can do in terms of digital media buy as opposed to TVC buys or television commercials or any of those big global campaigns. You can do a lot more, and you can reach a lot more people, and you can segment it a lot more effectively. What I would really suggest in Sri Lanka, though, is don't just have a digital campaign. Well, two things. Don't have a digital campaign that is siloed from the rest of the destination. Don't have one person who works at the DMO who is digital guy and maybe a digital team. There's no such thing as digital guy or digital team anymore. Digital is part of every part of tourism, from product development and its online presence to sales and distribution, to PR and communications. Everyone needs those digital skills. Everyone in the organization should be a digital guy, not that one poor old digital guy that used to sit in an office and people would come and tell him their printer's not working. So it is about digitally empowering the whole organization and then moving beyond the organization as well. As you've seen from some of the examples I've given you, user-generated content comes from tourists. the best point of access to those tourists are the tourist businesses. So we use this term called destination communitization. How can you build relationships between the trade and the DMO, a public-private sector partnership, where you have travelers that share their experiences through the location tags that they use to tag that to a business, to a hotel, to a place they're in, or the hashtags that they use, that we aggregate that together through the tourist businesses themselves so they can use it, but then also that they make that content accessible to the destination as well. And you create what's called a destination community, a content community, we call them when we set them up. And those can be a broad destination content community. It can be a regional specific content community around a particular area. It can be a thematic content community around the diving industry, the wellness industry, the adventure industry, and so on. And that lets you what we call purpose and repurpose that content for multiple purposes that we draw from the industry. So it's not just about which platforms should we advertise on, and those are sort of the obvious, you know, Instagram is the most powerful when it comes to travel in most markets, and there's other tools out there, Facebook, a lot of the location-based tools as well. TripAdvisor has a huge influence on travel decisions as well. But it's also about how you use them, and it's how you use them in partnership with the industry. So break down the silos, the silo of digital within the DMO, so you don't just have digital department, and then the breakdown of content access and marketing into public-private sector partnerships between DMO and the trade. Thanks.
Thank you, Damien. Kumali, one more last question before you leave us. The current strategy seems to be targeting high-end tourists. What are we doing to attract the millennial tourist?
Actually, the current strategy is not to attract only high-end tourists. Now, there's a misunderstanding, I think. When you say high-end, that doesn't mean it's $750 or $2,000 rooms. It's a higher return, a higher value for the consumer, our customer, as well as for ourselves. So with regards to the millennium traveler, I think the adventure tourism, the sports, even the app I mentioned before, where I was saying the hiking, the camping sites and all that which will be on the app as well. These are the areas that I think we will focus on, get expertise actually from outside as well. To help us out with some of these areas that we don't possibly have the expertise internally.
All right, great. Thank you, Krimali, for joining us. I know that you scheduled to come in with a very, very busy schedule, and thanks for joining us and for your wonderful comments. It will be very useful for us.
Thank you.
So those of you who are joining just now, please do not hesitate to ask your questions. We can take a few more, and we will actually pass your questions to the two experts that we are working with us right now on the webinar. And your questions can be directly given to either on Zoom using the Q&A, or you can actually go to Facebook, or you also can go to slido.com and use the hashtag Sri Lanka Tourism. Damien, one question that comes to you again. Given the high recovery of rate and the low fertility rate in terms of corona, should we highlight this as a factor, as something to promote the destination currently as part of the communication, or shouldn't we silent about it? One of the viewers is asking the question.
Sure. And actually, before I even get into that, if I could just jump onto the point Kamali was just making with the previous question, because I just want to make that clear when we talked about demographics. Millennial travelers are not poor travelers. We don't talk about the high end versus the millennials at all. Millennials make money. Millennials also are getting married much later, or not at all, than previous generations. They're having children much later than not all. So they've got more disposable income at a younger age than previous generations. They also spend less per trip than those baby boomers and older travelers, but they travel a lot more. Not just one trip a year, they'll often do several a year as well. Travel is extremely important to them, and they invest money into it. They often stay longer as well. If you look at Australia, for example, everyone knows the backpackers that go and make their way up the east coast of Australia. You would call them poor travelers, but don't forget they normally take 2 months or 3 months to do that. So they're when you accumulate what they're spending every day, they're spending more than someone who comes for a week to the country. So don't please consider two things: high-end travel versus millennials. There are high-end and mid-range and low-end travelers in all demographics. Sorry, back to your question of should you promote your low case numbers? No. That is a real risk, and several destinations fell into that trap in the early days of COVID. We don't have it, so let's market ourselves as COVID-free. You do not want that message out there when that situation changes. And unfortunately, it can when you open up as a destination. Many countries are unfortunately going through this process now. I work with Jordan in the Middle East, who had almost completely eliminated the virus. They opened to essential travel, they now have one of the highest infection rates in the world. You can't predict what's going to happen in your destination, and you do not want to make a bold statement like that: we're free from COVID, or it's not impacting our destination. Maybe it's true, and hopefully, God willing, it will be for Sri Lanka into the future, but it's a very big risk to go out there marketing yourself as having a low rate of infection, because that can very quickly become not true, and it's not stuff. And don't forget, one of the challenges online, it is important that we do practice ephemeral messaging. When we talk about crisis management with destinations these days, if you post something online and the situation changes, go back and delete it. People forget to do that. They forget that search engines and histories will pull up those old statements, those old campaigns. The last thing you want to have out there is Sri Lanka has a low rate of infection or we're COVID-free, when the opposite is happening in country. So no, and I really don't think that even works.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Damien. Thank you, Damien, for your detailed answer on that. John, this question for you: have we invested too much in tourism, resulting overcapacity made worse by coronavirus? I know that you're not fully aware of the statistics, etc., but is this a fair assessment by the questions that have been raised here?
I think, to be honest, without wanting to duck a question, I think that's one for Damien. But I'll actually just pick up on something Damien just said, which is about marketing yourself as COVID-free. A direct analogy to this is the airline industry, and I do a lot of work with airlines around the world. You will never see an airline overtly marketing itself as, we are safe, we haven't had an accident, therefore come and fly with us, because that safety message is implicit in everything they do. Now, if you look for it, you will find it. You will find it when they talk about the type of aircraft they operate, how well trained their pilots are, how well they maintain their aircraft. But you will never see them saying, we are the safest. They might say, we operate a very young, fuel-efficient fleet. We have the best trained pilots in the world, whatever it may be. But they never address it head-on like that. Because, as Damien said, you have one accident, your entire marketing strategy is out the window. So if you market yourself as being COVID-free, all it takes is a sudden outbreak of infections, and that strategy now is no longer operative. So Damien, I'll let you pick up the question about overdevelopment.
Yeah, so so the question is that have we invested too much in tourism, resulting in overcapacity made worse by coronavirus, or is it it's been asked that is it a fair assessment which the viewer has come into?
Possibly. I don't know the exact investment levels in Sri Lanka or the total number of hotel rooms available. Over tourism was all we talked about in the tourism development space until the start of this year. It was such a huge issue. Certainly that issue is gone with the coming of COVID, but it's certainly not something that we want back. It definitely was proving to be one of the most damaging elements to come back to the theme of today, to destination image and brand image. Once you become known as an overcrowded destination, it's very hard to come back from that. And it was a term that was starting to be used very widely in many destinations. Some people poo-pooed over tourism and said, it's not really a problem. You know, how can you have too much business? You can. And we saw that across Europe. Apart from the damage to the destination image, you also have a damage to local communities and people that don't benefit from tourism that get sick of tourism. The backlash, the anti-tourism lobby actually was a thing. It was on the front cover of Time magazine last year, pre-COVID. That around the world, we started seeing people protesting against tourism. We started seeing people voting in politicians that promised to reduce or remove tourism because of its impact on everyday life. Now, of course, this seems like a whole other world we're talking about now, but we certainly don't want to come back with a model that focuses on volume over value. That model's also not going to work in this new world. More than ever, we need to focus on value over volume. How many tourists can we realistically get? How long can they stay, and how much will they spend? Those are the critical metrics rather than arrival numbers that we can focus on. Sometimes it's not even overdevelopment. Sometimes it's just focus on the wrong markets or partnerships with suppliers from the wrong market. The Chinese market, which I know has been a huge growth market in many destinations, has also been one of the ones that has proved to be one of the drivers of prices downwards. It constantly demands reduction of price in return for volume, and that's been seen as one of the global drivers of over tourism. So we need to assess the markets that we want to bring back and the value that we get from them as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Damien. Just one last question. You got a minute to answer that. As you have covered this, what is the unique potential of Sri Lanka to market as a best tourism destination using community-based tourism, ecotourism, agro-tourism, and spiritual tourism models? What should be the strategies for that? If you can just highlight 2 or 3 strategies that can be used to market it. First, whether we should be doing it. Second, what are the strategies that we can make use of it?
Yeah, I think all of those things are things that you need to market, because they're all obviously come to mind. Even with the research presentation we saw today, a lot of those things that the professor talked about, elephants, nature, tea, in terms of agritourism, wellness and spas, those are critical products. And most importantly, they are growth products. So it's looking at those products that you have and potential products that have very strong appeal to markets, particularly to these millennial markets, and all of those things do. And really about targeting it to those right travelers. It's so easy now to segment markets based on interests. That really is one of the fundamental ways that these campaigns should be built. One of the positive signs I see from Chairwoman Kamali that I think is really important that SLTDA is doing, and not a lot of DMOs are doing, is restructuring the organization experientially. Most DMOs traditionally had someone, a bit like the digital guy I just talked about. They had US market guy and China market woman and UK market woman and France market man, whose specific job was dealing with a particular national market. The reality is, someone that wants one of those products you're talking about, someone who's interested in spiritual travel, well, those people exist in the UK, those people exist in China. Hikers exist in all those countries, scuba divers exist in all those countries. And you're not going to reach them as an American or as a Chinese person or as a French person. You're going to reach them as a diver, as someone interested in agritourism, someone interested in diving. The way we identify those people online is through the community actions they have, the Instagram accounts they follow that are specific to that activity, to the pages they like on Facebook that are specific to that activity. So the shift is from countries to communities. We need to start selling to those communities. So by Kamali's plan to restructure the organization experientially, she's taking a huge, bold, but important step in the right direction. Because rather than selling just to a national market, you're selling to an experiential market, to a community over a content. So through that means and campaigns that specifically reach out to those communities is how you will promote those niche areas. Thanks.
Thank you, Damien. And that actually comes to the end of today's webinar, and brought to you by Sri Lanka Tourism and the Advocata Institute for the benefit of the tourism industry, especially thinking beyond COVID and the importance of the image. We were looking at today the importance of understanding the audience and their desires, and also the right experiences to be formulated, moving away from the mass tourism, and also the importance of millennials to be added into that rethinking of Sri Lanka tourism strategy to fit into the post-COVID communication strategy, and also the importance of stakeholder actually working with them hand in hand with the Sri Lanka tourism to create one message but the many messengers. So with that note, thank you everyone for joining today for the research, and I would like to thank especially John Bailey, the Managing Consultant, Global Communication Consulting, Damien Cook, Founder and the CEO of Tourism Frontier, and Dr. K.P. Lalit Chandral, Senior Lecturer, University of Sri Jawadanapura Management Faculty, as well as Mrs. Krimali Fernando, Chairperson, Sri Lanka Tourism, and the entire staff that have put this forward together. Thank you very much, and I hope hopeful that you found this particular webinar very useful, and see you again maybe with another one. Thank you.